Our scripture today is not in the book of Mark. We've finished Mark. So we are in 1 Samuel chapter 1, and we're going to be looking at verses 1 through 8. And Samuel is an interesting book, and today we're kind of going to cover one of those general topics that we see throughout Samuel in its practice, sort of a thing. And it's not one of those things that everybody thinks about necessarily when they go to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel is a historical book, so it does give us an account on some things. It kind of gives us the lives of Samuel and the kingship being established in Israel. But one of the major themes that we see throughout the book of 1 Samuel actually is the idea of family, right? And the importance of family. So what we find is that God actually has established 3 institutions, right? And these 3 institutions go in this order. And if they don't go in this order, the world kind of falls apart. First institution that God created was family, right? With the establishment of marriage, right? And family is kind of the ground floor for everything. It's the bottom of the pyramid. The second institution that God created, the nation Israel and the church, right? This is the spiritual world, right? And then the third institution is government. If we don't get our families right, the church isn't right. If we don't have the church right, the government isn't right. Right? And so it's important that we find ourselves building up that ground floor properly. Right? And so God has a plan and stuff. And so 1 Samuel, verses 1 through 8 says this. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, Zuphite, from the hill country of Ephraim. He was a country folk, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu. In Chronicles, it says Elihu, slightly different. The son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. And because the Lord had closed her womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Elkanah, her husband, would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? And so, as we look at that, we actually have 2 families here. We have the family of Elkanah, however you pronounce his name, right? Gotta love names that you can't pronounce. I'm glad that's not on one of my teaching roles. Right? Students hate it when you mispronounce their names. But we have Elkanah's family with his 2 wives and Peninnah's children. And we have Eli's family and his 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Right? Phinehas and Hophni are priests, but they're not good priests. And later on in Samuel, we'll see that they were kind of corrupt, and they made people give them gifts and stuff instead of necessarily bringing things before God. And part of that is the failure of Eli as a father. But we have, within Elkanah's family, we have these 2 wives, and we have a struggle that's going on. The reality is, we see this a lot in Scripture. Elkanah's family is not constructed the way God intended. right? There's a large argument that a lot of people like to make when you're talking about the institute of marriage and how it's supposed to be between one man and one woman. And a lot of people go, well, this person in the Bible had multiple wives, and that person had multiple wives, and that person had multiple wives. And when you really know the stories, you smile and you go, yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. You're right. How did it go for them? Right? Because let's think about that. Abraham had Sarah, and things weren't going right, and so Sarah said, here, take my handmaid. And so he takes her handmaid and has a child with her, and then Sarah gets jealous, right? And she gets frustrated, and so they kind of have to drive the handmaid and her son out. Not the way it was intended to be, right? We have Elkanah here. He's got 2 wives, and they don't get along, right? Every time we see this polygamy in the Old Testament, it doesn't work out, right? It's not a great idea. Jesus said this in Mark 10:6-9. He says, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the 2 shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer 2, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Not very good with numbers all the time. That's why I teach English, right? But I can count to 2. 1, 2. Not 3. 3 is too many. He said 2, right? The 2 shall become one flesh. God had a plan, and he establishes this plan. It's been since the beginning, right? The first example we had was Adam and Eve. And let's face it, just with 2 of them, it was hard enough to do it right. And we want to throw extra people into the mix? Sorry, it just doesn't work. And so our passage in 1 Samuel kind of gives us that hint that it doesn't work. And so we see God establishes what a marriage is supposed to be. And the husband and wife, they are the base for the family. As the family is the base for the church, and the church is the base for the government. And so God has a plan established for the husband and wife. First thing that we see is here in Mark chapter 10, verse 7. Right? First thing that's supposed to happen when marriage happens, for this reason a man shall leave the father and mother. Right? His father and mother. So when you get married, I guess it's a big problem in the world that guys, when they get married, they're still like, well, you don't cook like my mother. I'm so glad my wife does not cook like my mother. Oh my goodness, the food is edible. It's great. Of course, Mom will watch us later and go, my food's edible. Well, it is now. But apparently, guys and Sarah, for the first couple of years of our marriage, well, would you rather call your mom? No, I don't want to call my mom. I didn't marry my mother. I'm glad I didn't marry my mother. That'd be weird, right? A man's supposed to leave his mother and father and cling to his wife, right? You got to separate and start something new. And so the 2 kind of join together. I have had some friends point out that it doesn't say that the wife has to leave her parents, right? So, which I laugh about because me and Mom and Pa are just 5 minutes up the road. We didn't get too far. So, but that's the first start. The 2 of them have to realize that they're the unit, that they're in it together. And the man is leaving his mother and his father. He's leaving his old life behind, right? Walking away from what he was to what he now is with his wife. It's a new man. Right? As a single guy, guys can do lots of things. They don't have to go, well, I can't spend my money this way. They can spend their money however they want to because they don't have to worry about, well, I need to make sure that my wife has food. I I need to make sure that there's a roof over the head. I need to make sure that the bills are paid. No, if I don't feed myself, that's on me. If I don't take care of my family, well, that's on me too. Right? And so that's the first thing we see. And then we have the books of Ephesians and Colossians and the book of 1 Peter, where they give a little bit more description on how the family is supposed to be run. And we're going to look at those, and we're going to cherry pick some stuff out of there. I'm going to point out the first thing in all three of them, though, is wives submit to your husbands. And nobody likes that part. I mean, a lot of husbands like that part, they don't get it right. And a lot of women don't like that part because they're like, well, I don't want to do everything he tells me to do. Well, that's not exactly what it means either, right? It does mean give him the last word, right? Give him the last word. And when I got married, my father taught me, yes, the last word is yes, dear. The last word, right? And almost every family I've met who lives out Ephesians and Colossians and 1 Peter, where the wives are submitting to the husbands, what we find is they don't even realize they're doing it half the time. Well, my wife runs the house. And if you ever go over to our house, you'll find that Sarah does kind of run the house for the most part. But every once in a while, there's a final word that, no, we've got to do this. And that final say goes to the husband. Right? And so that's in all three of them. Because apparently that's the only thing that women need to work on. For the guys, there's something different in each and every one of them. So let's look at Ephesians. Ephesians 5, and jumping down from 22 down to 27? No, 25, right? So the ladies, they get this little section there. Submit to your husbands. Then the husbands. Husbands, love your wives, right? You would think that's a no-brainer. You would think that's a no-brainer. Husbands, love your wives. Well, I love my wife. But one of the problems is a lot of men don't know how to love. They don't understand the concept of love, right? And when they say, well, I love my wife, well, they could easily insert the word pizza for wife, right? I love my pizza. I like pizza an awful lot. It's really good. And Sarah's telling me I might have to go dairy-free. I don't know. Husbands, love your wives. He doesn't stop there. Just as Christ loved the church, right? So he specifies what this love looks like. The love of a husband is supposed to look like the love of Christ for the church, right? And he gave himself up for her. That means his love is sacrificial. Men are first told, love your wives in such a way that you're willing to give up everything for her, right? And a lot of people go, well, I'll die for my wife. That's great, but that's not all that it's saying here. Christ died for us, and then he rose again for us. And then he lived for us, right? Are we willing to give up our whatever it is? You guys know I'm a city boy. Sarah is not, right? We don't live in a city because Sarah doesn't want to live in a city. And I love my wife, and so I give that up. I would like to live down further south where there is no snow in the winter because I don't like snow. I think it's one of the worst things God invented, that and flies and mosquitoes and such, right? Sarah, if we ever moved, wants to go north, right? If we ever left New York, Alaska, right? I love my wife. We're not moving until she's no longer with us, right? He did it to make her holy, to cleanse her. He did it so her joy would be full, right? That's the way husbands are called to love their wives, right? And then it jumps down and it gives some instructions for the husbands again in verse 4 of chapter 6. But in this case, not as husbands, but as fathers. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instructions of the Lord. All right? So these are the things that it's saying to the men. All right? Notice it doesn't say, moms, don't exasperate your children. Right? In my experience, mothers don't exasperate their children that much. They coddle them. They baby them. And it's dads who are like, just get out there and do it. Suck it up. But Dad, my leg's broken. I don't care. Walk it off. Right? If your leg's broken, I'll give you something else to think about. Right? Fathers, don't exasperate your children. And it also gives instructions for children there. Children, obey your parents. Right? That seems to be pretty constant too in all of these. Right? Wives need to submit. Children need to obey. Husbands, love your wives. Jumping over to Colossians chapter 3. Right? Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things above, not earthly things, for you died, and your life is now hidden in Christ. Nope. I just have the wrong verse there. Oh, that's because I'm in the wrong verse. 3:18, not 3:1. Sorry. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Right? So the first one was, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gives you this sacrificial thing. Then it's, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Right? Too often times we hear stories about men who are abusive to their wives, and you go, how can you do that? If you love them, you can't do that, right? Or I knew one guy who he took that wife, submit to your husbands, so to heart that when he came home, if she didn't wash the floor the way he wanted it washed, he would get, like, that's not, husbands, don't be harsh with your wives, right? You want to treat them nicely. You want to give them everything. And then we have children, obey your parents, right? And then fathers, again, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged, right? So again, fathers, be a little lenient on the kids' son. I know, I have to take that own advice too, right? Because I am definitely the harder one. As I told the girls, you're going to clean that room, or I'm going to throw it all out, because if you can't pick it up, you don't need it, right? Because they cleaned their room so nicely last week, and then last night it was trashed. Oh my goodness. They cleaned it again. They're good. And then jumping over to 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7, and I'm going to just look at verse 7 here, because 1 through 6 is about wives, submit to your husbands, even if they're unsaved, submit to them, because your act of obedience may actually help win them over to the Lord. Verse 7, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner, and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. The King James actually says, husbands, live with your wives with understanding. Right? Try to figure them out. Try to understand where they're coming from. Try to listen to them. I had a friend, one of my mentors, said, wise men listen to their wives. Right? Not just because you want to make them happy, but because our wives have a lot of wisdom. Right? And there are a lot of men out there who don't realize that. There are a lot of men out there who don't realize that there are people outside of themselves who have wisdom. And they're like, I'm it. And so we see that God has a plan here. He has an order of how the family is supposed to be run. Well, there's something that happens when we step out of that order. Right? The family becomes dysfunctional. When the family becomes dysfunctional, it kind of disrupts everything in different ways. So in the case of in 1 Samuel, we have Eli, who is dysfunctional with his two sons. We don't know if he was too harsh on them or if he just wasn't present at all. Right? One of the big epidemics in our society today is fathers aren't present enough in the lives of their children. Right? The other hard part is that there are the fathers who, when they are present, are too harsh with their children. And we need to find the balance. Right? We need to find the balance. Eli didn't have the balance. In fact, this happens to a lot of ministers. And you hear about all these pastors' kids who grow up and they leave the faith, and then because their fathers were so ingrained in the ministry that they weren't involved in the lives of their children. Right? We need to find the balance. And so Eli, he didn't have the balance. And so his sons, they go off and they do their thing, and they become self-centered and selfish and kind of ruin worship at the temple. And then we have Phinehas, who, the husband of 2 wives instead of 1. He screwed it up. And because he screwed it up, between the 2 women, there becomes this kind of squabble, this kind of jealousy, and this discontentment. Right? We have Phinehas, who sees that Hannah is getting a double portion. And so she gets angry and embittered because she wants what Hannah has. And so she takes it out on Hannah. And she picks on her, pokes at the problem. Right? Then Elkanah, he supposedly loves Hannah. If you love a woman, you don't take on a second woman. That's the way things work. Right? He gives her the double portion, and she is not content, right? The problems in their marriage causes discontentment with her. I can stipulate that had it just been Elkanah and Hannah, she probably would have been content. Yes, she wants children. She wants to give them an heir. She wants offspring. But she probably would have been, but that's not what God gave me. Instead, I have Elkanah. But what happens here is Hannah's womb is shut up. Elkanah gets Phinehas. She gives him children. And now Elkanah has this family and Hannah. And she doesn't feel part of that. She has this discontentment. And discontentment destroys a lot of things. We are called to be content. Right? 1 Timothy 6:6-8 says, "Now godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content." Right? Contentment destroys a lot of things. And we're called to be content. But part of that is because we're called to recognize that our relationship is enough. Right? That family unit was supposed to mirror our relationship with Christ. Right? Christ is the husband and us as the bride. Christ is always faithful. He is always there for us. Right? Elkanah, he has this question for Hannah. He says, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" Well, had he not taken on another wife, he probably would have. Right? But when he took on another wife, he broke the image that marriage is supposed to reflect. Right? Marriage is supposed to be a reflection of our relationship with God. And when he broke that, it doesn't work. When he breaks that, she can't see him the way God intended. The psalmist says this, Psalm 37:4, "Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart." Right? In a marriage, your spouse is supposed to be your desire. Right? When you allow other things to take that place because of discontentment, it doesn't work right. And you feel unfulfilled no matter what happens. In your relationship with God, he is supposed to be the desire of your heart. That is the image that is supposed to be there. Marriage is supposed to reflect that. When we screw it up, it doesn't work. And so as we go through Samuel, we're going to see these family issues come up. And we're going to see some of that. But the reality is, as we look in the world around us, we see it an awful lot. I am always mortified when talking with my students about their families, right? Because it turns out that this one, his mother is now married to that one's father, and they have another step sibling somewhere in the mix. It's like, and it's not one or two of them. The family unit in America has been under attack for quite some time. In fact, one of the tenets of the Black Lives Matter movement was to disable or dismantle the nuclear family, which is why a lot of people were like, whoa, we can't get behind that, right? I agree Black Lives Matter, but I can't agree that we should dismantle the nuclear family, right? We need to learn to protect our families. Because once our families are protected, it works better for everybody. For the people in the family, and really the church and the government. It works out best for the nation if we could get the family unit under control. And it all starts with husbands, love your wives. Right? Well, it starts with husbands, leave your mother and father, cling to your wife. Then love her. Why? Submit to your husbands. Children, obey your parents. It all starts there. Fathers, don't exasperate your children. If we could get that right, if we could follow God's plan there, it would fix a lot of society's problems. But sometimes we go, God, you just don't understand my situation. No, he does. And his plan is perfect. So let's follow his plan. His plan's good. Will you bow with me in prayer?